Everyone tells you buying a home is the smartest financial decision you'll ever make. Your parents did it. Your relatives brag about it. Financial gurus preach it like gospel. But here's the question nobody wants to actually run the numbers on. Is buying really better than renting, or is that just something we've all agreed to believe without checking the math? Let's actually check the math. Say you're deciding between two paths. Path 1, you buy a home worth $300,000. Path 2, you rent a similar home for $1,500 a month and invest the difference. Both paths, same starting point, same person, same income. Where do you end up in 15 years? Let's start with buying, because on the surface it feels like the obvious winner. You put down 20%, that's $60,000 up front. You take a mortgage on the remaining $240,000 at around 7% interest over 30 years. Your monthly payment comes out to roughly $1,600 just for principal and interest. But that's not the whole picture, and this is where most people stop calculating and start assuming. On top of that mortgage payment, you've got property taxes, typically 1 to 2% of the home's value every year. On a $300,000 home, that's anywhere from $3,000 to $6,000 annually, or roughly $250 to $500 a month. Then there's homeowner's insurance, another $100 to $150 a month depending on where you live. Add maintenance and repairs, and industry standard estimates put that at 1 to 2% of the home's value per year as well. That's another $250 to $500 a month that most first-time buyers completely forget to budget for, right up until the day the water heater dies or the roof starts leaking. So your real monthly cost of owning that $300,000 home isn't $1,600. It's closer to $2,200 to $2,400 once you add taxes, insurance, and maintenance together. Now here's the part nobody talks about. In the early years of a mortgage, almost all of your payment goes toward interest, not equity. On that $240,000 loan at 7%, in year 1, you're paying around $16,700 in interest, and only about $2,800 actually goes toward paying down the loan. You're building equity at a snail's pace while the bank collects the bulk of your money as profit. It takes years before the scale tips and more of your payment starts going toward principal than interest. On a standard 30-year loan at 7%, that crossover point doesn't happen until around year 21. Read that again. For the first 2 decades of homeownership, more than half of every payment you make is going straight into the lender's pocket, not your net worth. Now let's talk about appreciation, because this is the number people love to fantasize about. Real estate historically appreciates around 3 to 4% per year on average, though this varies wildly by location and time period. If we're generous and use 4% annual appreciation, that $300,000 home would be worth around $540,000 after 15 years. Sounds impressive, right? Except you have to subtract what you actually spent to get there. Over 15 years, you've paid roughly $288,000 in mortgage payments alone, not counting taxes, insurance, and maintenance, which could easily add another $80,000 to $100,000 over that period. So your total cash outlay, including your original $60,000 down payment, is somewhere in the range of $430,000 to $450,000. Your home is worth $540,000, but you still owe money on the mortgage. After 15 years on a 30-year loan, you'd still have around $170,000 left on the principal. So your actual equity, home value minus what you still owe, comes out to roughly $370,000. Now compare that to renting. If you rent that same $1,500 a month home instead of buying, your monthly housing cost is lower than the true cost of ownership from day one. Remember, owning that home really costs $2,200 to $2,400 a month once you include taxes, insurance, and maintenance. Renting at $1,500 means you have somewhere between $700 and $900 a month in savings compared to the owner, plus you never had to come up with that $60,000 down payment in the first place. So what happens if you take that $60,000 and invest it immediately in a simple low-cost index fund, and then invest that monthly difference of, let's conservatively say, $700 every single month for 15 years? Historically, the stock market has returned around 7% annually after adjusting for inflation, using a broad index fund. Some years it's up 20%, some years it's down 15%, but averaged out over long periods, 7% real return is a reasonable, even slightly conservative, benchmark. $60,000 invested and left alone for 15 years at 7% annual growth becomes approximately $165,000. Then you add $700 a month, invested consistently for 15 years at that same 7% return. That monthly investing alone grows to roughly $220,000. Add those together, and your total investment portfolio after 15 years is somewhere around $385,000. Compare that to the homeowner's equity of roughly $370,000. The renter who invested the difference actually comes out slightly ahead, and that's before we even account for rent increases eating into the comparison, or the fact that stock market returns historically outpace real estate appreciation over most long time periods, or the tax advantages of retirement accounts if that $700 a month went into something like an index fund inside a tax-advantaged account. Now, before you go tell everyone that renting is the secret to getting rich, let's be fair and look at the other side, because this comparison isn't as simple as declaring a winner and walking away. Homeownership has a massive advantage that pure math doesn't fully capture: forced savings. Most people are terrible at consistently investing $700 every single month for 15 years without fail. Life happens. Emergencies come up. The temptation to spend that money on something else is constant. A mortgage payment is not optional. You either pay it or you lose your home. That structural forcing function means a lot of renters who claim they'll invest the difference simply never do it consistently, and that's where the real math falls apart in practice, even if it works perfectly on paper. There's also the emotional and lifestyle value of owning a home that doesn't show up on a spreadsheet. You can renovate however you want. You're not at the mercy of a landlord raising your rent or deciding not to renew your lease. There's stability for raising a family, for building roots in a community, for simply not worrying about being forced to move. That peace of mind has real value, even if it's not easily converted into dollars. On the flip side, renting offers flexibility that homeownership simply cannot. If your job relocates you, if you want to try living in a different city, if the neighborhood changes and you want out, you can leave with 30 or 60 days' notice. A homeowner trying to sell has to deal with real estate agent commissions, typically 5 to 6% of the sale price, closing costs, staging, and the simple unpredictability of how long a home might sit on the market. Selling a $300,000 home could easily cost you $15,000 to $20,000 in fees alone, money that just evaporates and never shows up in anyone's equity calculation. There's also leverage to consider. When you buy a home with a mortgage, you're controlling a $300,000 asset with only $60,000 of your own money. That's the power of leverage, and it's why real estate can be such a powerful wealth-building tool when the market goes up. But leverage cuts both ways. If home prices drop, and they absolutely can, just look at what happened between 2008 and 2012 in many markets. That same leverage can wipe out your equity far faster than if you'd simply owned stocks outright. And here's something people conveniently forget when they're comparing renting to owning: rent goes up. If you're renting at $1,500 a month today, in 15 years, assuming a modest 3% annual increase, you could be paying over $2,300 a month by the end of that period. Meanwhile, the homeowner's mortgage payment, at least the principal and interest portion, stays exactly the same for all 30 years. Property taxes and insurance will rise, but the core payment is locked in. That's a form of protection against inflation that renters simply don't have. So which one actually wins? The honest answer is, it depends entirely on your specific numbers, your local market, how long you plan to stay, and most importantly, your own discipline. If you're the kind of person who will actually invest that monthly difference every single month without fail, and you don't plan on staying in one place for more than 5 to 7 years, renting and investing can absolutely outperform buying, especially in high-cost markets like San Francisco, New York, or parts of Southern California where home prices are wildly disconnected from local rents. But if you plan to stay in a home for 10, 15, 20 years or more, if you value the stability and the forced savings mechanism of a mortgage payment, and if you're buying in a market where home prices are reasonably aligned with local incomes and rents, homeownership can absolutely build more wealth over time, particularly once you factor in that after 30 years, your mortgage is paid off completely, and your housing cost basically disappears except for taxes and maintenance, something that never happens when you rent. There's actually a simple rule of thumb that can help you figure out which side of this equation you're likely on. It's called the price-to-rent ratio. You take the price of a home and divide it by the annual rent for a similar property. If that number is below 15, buying tends to make more financial sense. If it's above 20, renting is usually the smarter financial move. Anywhere in between, it's genuinely close, and the decision comes down to your personal circumstances rather than pure math. At the end of the day, the real math doesn't declare a universal winner, and anyone who tells you renting is always throwing money away, or that buying is always the smartest investment you can make, is skipping half the calculation. Run your own numbers. Look at your local price-to-rent ratio. Be honest with yourself about whether you'd actually invest the difference if you chose to rent. Because the version of this decision that makes you the most money isn't about which asset class historically performs better. It's about which path you can actually stick to, consistently, for 15 or 20 years, without breaking the plan halfway through.